Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So I wanted to talk a little more about one of the most crucial things to consider when facing the Hive. Family. No, seriously, we need to talk a little bit about lineage. This is not one of those, what I think is now probably tired, Fast and Furious references, and yeah. When Crota was killed, it brought about Oryx's crusade and began the Taken War. When Oryx also died, it left both his brood and the brood of his son in utter disarray. However, such disarray was belayed by Crota's brood in the Hellmouth thanks to the presence of his daughters, Hashladun, Besserith, Kinox, and Vashir. The daughters of Crota themselves were able to somewhat rally a reasonable Hive force, although ultimately they ended up losing power thanks to another Hive who set them up for failure by facing them against the Guardians, and yes, that Hive was indeed Savathûn. The point is that to the Hive, family is important, so if we're going to face the Witch Queen, we need to know a little bit more about the nature of her family. This is what we're going to be talking about a little bit more today in the lore. First though, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, Keeps. Did you know that 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? For immortal god-slaying guardians, that means that hair loss is going to be a problem at some point. It's just a question of when. Thankfully, with Keeps, you can prevent hair loss by doing something about it while you still have hair left. With Keeps, you can get treated at home, and your product gets shipped to your door. You'll know that your product is right for you because a licensed doctor will recommend a treatment plan for you based on your information. Keeps treatments typically take about 4 to 6 months to start seeing results, so it's important to act now and do something about your hair fast. Find out why Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors and why it's trusted by thousands of men by trying it for yourself. If you're ready to take action to prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/bife or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/bife. Thanks again to Keeps for sponsoring this video. Anyway, back to the lore. So, if we're going to assess the extent of Savathûn's potential future influence, we need to see the extent of how many children she has. Her own power is substantial, and we're not going to talk about that today, but I think it's worth first acknowledging a very scary truth, which is that whilst Oryx's 4 children, Crota, Nokris, Uranuk, and Urhalak, are well known to us, Savathûn's offspring really are not. There's nothing that definitively gives us a number of offspring for sure, which means that the 3 that we know of might just be the start. So, knowing full well that there may be quite a few others out there serving Savathûn in her new schemes and maybe even being a part of her lucent brood, let's talk about the 3 offspring that we know of. And yes, before you all ask, we've killed all of them in some fashion or another, and no, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are dead forever. The first to appear of all of them was Bulwer. Bulwer is a rather interesting figure in all of this, in spite of the fact that she is probably dead. We encountered her back in the Taken King expansion, and she was one of the 3 final bosses that could be faced in the Court of Oryx by offering an antiquated ruin. Bulwer's mechanics were basically all about poisoning the ground and making certain safe zones that you had to stand in, but in the grand scheme of things, that is not what's fascinating about Bulwer. What's fascinating about Bulwer is that she's in the Court of Oryx in the first place, and not in the Court of Savathûn. It might be something that's been left as a bit of a hint, as opposed to something that has been directly stated, but it's not an understatement, I think, to say that finding a daughter of Savathûn still with Oryx's forces makes nowhere near as much sense, considering that the Hive Gods tend to have their children as a means of creating powerful champions and creating additional tribute for themselves, which their children will tithe to them. Savathûn additionally took her broods into the Black Hole at the very end of the assault on the Giftmast in the Harmony, which separated her brood from Oryx, which implies that any children who stayed behind deliberately at this point, before Savathûn infiltrated the system of Sol for herself. So, the fact that Bulwer therefore resides within the Court of Oryx seems to imply, strangely enough, that she's broken ties with her mother. This allegiance to Oryx is revealed even further through Balwar's Grimoire card, which implies a greater degree of trust between the Taken King and his niece. It reads as follows. To Bulwer I entrust, with bitter tongue, a terrible work. Daughter of Savathûn, untouched by time, your death is well hidden. You will be the suzerain of metabolisms, gather up the lie shapes, neither eat nor mock them, as you crave. Instead, learn to chew them into poisons. Craft for me a flawless armor word. Separate the death from the dying. Cut the shadow apart from the fire. Make the fire burn hot. Arm us with weapons against our foe. Arm my court for the long crusade. The fact that Oryx is firstly trusting Balwer and is asking her to go as far as to arm his court is really quite something, especially for a daughter of Savathûn who is ostensibly his rival, even if for the Hive, love is war and war is love. Remember that the Hive gods are always attempting to undermine each other as a means of making each other more resilient, even if it is one of those moments at which they may be able to supplant their rival. If the rival becomes stronger and survives, the outcome is also good. It's one of those strange moments at which we examine Hive culture and need to understand that normally a daughter or son being planted in the court like this would almost certainly be a means of sabotage for Savathûn's purposes, but it's not by the looks of things. This tells us some fascinating things about Bulwer's agenda compared to that of her mother. Now, here's the thing, we may never find out more about that agenda because, well, Bulwer is dead. We killed her in the court of Oryx. But the thing is that because of how high up the chain of command in the Hive strata she really is, it's not impossible that Bulwer has a throne world. So, with all of that said, I think we need to be ready for the question of whether Bulwer is really truly dead or not, and where she might now stand in the Hive hierarchy and where she might now stand in the war against her own mother. Maybe she wasn't powerful enough to have a throne world, but I don't think I'd be looking at that possibility with any huge degree of certainty. I think that she is in fact powerful enough. With her being as powerful as she is, I think there's also a real question as to whether she would then be able to marshal some of Oryx's leftover forces, or maybe even the forces of Crota's remaining broods on the moon, who have now been scattered between our assaults and the last assaults of Osiris, who I believe it's stated killed the last two witches of Crota's brood, Kinox and Voshir. I need to double check that fact, so maybe someone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I believe that's in the recordings that were left in Zavala's office at the beginning of the Season of the Hunt. If you haven't unlocked those, by the way, if you go to them in the tower and look at the computer to the left of his desk, should still be there. Either way, to continue, next up we have another one of Savathûn's offspring, and one that we know a little bit more about. His name is Moloch, and he is the only known son of Savathûn. Moloch is also known as the Pride of Oryx. And yeah, there's a fair bit of tomfoolery and strangeness attached to him, so I'll explain. Moloch at one point was clearly a Hive Knight that was supposedly Savathûn's son, but the weird thing upon first examination is that once again Moloch is not only serving in the armies of Oryx, but also that he's taken. The thing is that whilst Balwer, by virtue of her position, sort of seems to be a bit of a traitor to her mother, Moloch is better explained through this method by his grimoire card, and it seems like a very strange three-way tug-of-war for his fate. So let's read that real quick. Moloch, cunning Moloch, sly and slippery, Savathûn begat you to betray me, to poison slowly, gnaw from within. Liar, Moloch, you are meant to tithe upon Oryx, to feed your maker with secret blight. Your secret is two lies. You betrayed your maker, your mother. You hid yourself from Savathûn. The tithing does not reach her jaws. Your thrall strength now is acolyte strength. Your acolyte strength now is knight strength. Your thieving pride is known and fed. Moloch, listen. I took you from your mother, my sister. Your shape is new. This shape is poison, the shape of secrets. I name you Moloch, which means my poison. A prize to taunt Sister Savathûn. Steal now for me. So in short, Moloch was ignoring the law of Oryx that was laid down upon the moment at which he became Taken King, which is that destruction must be tithed up the chain of hive authority to feed the Ascendant Hive. Moloch would have normally tithed to Savathun, his mother, but in this instance, he hid from Savathun and kept the tithes for himself. Oryx would later take Moloch as a sort of taunt against his sister, whose original intent, it appears, for Moloch was as a way of poisoning Oryx's tribute. Moloch is therefore a far more interesting character, as he's a hive that was stuck between the three prongs of his own plans and the plans of his mother and uncle, Savathun and Oryx. We faced Moloch in the Taken King's April update, and in this moment he attempted to gain control of the Taken throne after Oryx's death. Moloch was able to command and create Taken Blights as well as other lesser Taken, and in this moment that we fought him in the Shrine of Oryx, we would be battling to the point where the entire room was smothered in darkness. Moloch himself is incredible, if only because he's living proof that over time, the Taken can regain some semblance of independence when they don't have an overriding will, and that they can even establish themselves as leaders if the need arises, and they have the requisite skill. With Moloch being a Taken, and with us having killed him, it's almost certain that he's not coming back though, because it's not likely that the Taken have throne worlds. But the same most certainly cannot be said for our third and final child of Savathun, Dul Incaru. Dul Incaru at this point is basically the best known of Savathun's children, and that's thanks to her being at the center of the curse on the Dreaming City. Dul Incaru is the witch at the center of the Shattered Throne, and presumably is one of the few spawn of Savathun who stayed loyal to her, or wasn't deployed like a weapon in Oryx's court. However, in spite of the amount that's been written about her, I really struggle to say that we know a ton about her, and I say that principally because of the fact that we have one interaction with her that spans across a few pages, and that interaction occurs in, of all places, Truth to Power. You know, the lawbook that must not be trusted from Forsaken, the same lawbook that led us all to the whole power level 999 hype that turned out to be quite nothing, and should be figured out as quite nothing if you'd actually read into the lore, but, you know, we were all wrapped up in that hype. We were all bound to the idea of, hey, maybe there's a special interaction when we have over 1,000 light, who knows. So yeah, all deception, all lies, all very Savathun flavored. And I think it's worth saying that we know next to nothing about this particular daughter of Savathun. The one thing that I think we can say is that Dul Incaru is somehow linked in with the curse of the Dreaming City, and therefore is tied into the 3-week repeated cycle there, as are many of the Awoken. She also canonically might have had a degree of control over some of the Taken within the Dreaming City, as many of them bear her name. Given that many of these same Taken forces are tied in with the curse on the Dreaming City, it's unclear whether Quaria's death and Savathun's loss of control over the Taken has truly influenced to the level of control exerted by Dul Incaru over these specific Taken. Whether that is the case or not is still to be seen, but ultimately, I think it's just remembering that Dul Incaru is still probably a threat. The one thing that we know for sure is that she's probably not dead and won't be vulnerable until such a time as the curse on the Dreaming City is disbanded permanently. And even then, once again we have the Throne World question. If she has one, then we could kill her in normal space and it wouldn't really matter. It would take her some time to return, but she would still return. So there you have all of the offspring of Savathun that we know of thus far, and perhaps more importantly, you can see the kind of stories that would evolve from them. Dul Incaru might still be loyal, but Bulwer, if she still lives, could potentially rise to control a fraction of Oryx's old brood, or those who were disunited throughout Sol. This, of course, is all based on the assumption that Bulwer held allegiances with Oryx and not her mother. But again, it's all based on assumption right now. For example, if I said anything further about Dul Incaru, I feel I would be leading you astray, because the reality is that it's very hard to know more about the Eternal Return than the fact that she will always be back at the end of the 3-week cycle. The children of Savathun are far more of a mystery than the children of Oryx were, and I don't think it's fair to count them out of the equation just yet. If you ask me, there's plenty more to be seen on this potential front, and for all we know, there may still be children of Savathun that have yet to be revealed. Perhaps they even count their number amongst the Hive Guardians. But that's all from me for now. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to leave your own thoughts about what might be happening with the Children of Savathûn, if anything at all in the future, go ahead and leave them in the comments section down below. Of course, if you want more Destiny content, you can hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rhodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.